check the flow. Show you the way that it go. God is good, but his life is hard. But it gets better when you grind it smart. I'm just really trying to leave a mark. We tired of being who they say we are. That's the baton, we gon' take it far. Always been real, we don't fake it all. Tired of 9 to 5. Just make enough to survive. Only living on the weekends. You really thinking that's why I'm alive? Busting out the scenes, time to live my dreams, do the things deep inside of me. This life, it continues with fighting me, but I don't have quitting inside of me. I will not jump in these boxes they throwing me. Talking to God and there's so much he's showing me. Shaping me, growing me, taking me sowing seeds. A growing tree, y'all get a load of me. Yeah, don't let them slow me. I get the bag like a grocery. I'm on my grind like I'm supposed to be. And I do not care if you notice me.
Today I have another amazing podcast for you guys, and I have an incredible person and a great friend. Her name is Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke, and she's a quantum physicist. Now, she has been in the field of spirituality for quite some time. She has the Quantum Learning Academy, and she's also part of
the Modern Mystery School.
She's also part of the Modern Mystery School. And you can catch her on Instagram, you can catch her on Facebook, social media, and her own platform. We'll talk about that very soon. But today we're gonna have a very interesting conversation about spirituality and quantum physics and how the two possibly go together. You've heard me talk about this for a while. You've heard me say a lot of things about the quantum field and quantum physics and how it could be linked to spirituality. But now we're gonna talk to an actual quantum physicist and see what her perspective is on this, and somebody that actually teaches this on a day-by-day basis. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Billy. It's
All right,
to be
great.
here.
Good to have you here. You and your husband just came from where?
From the UK.
Yeah.
From Northern England.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good trip. So thanks for coming all the way down here. We're gonna have a great podcast. I got a few questions on my phone that I'm gonna be asking you. And I'm really interested in also just giving a very short backstory about how you got into science and spirituality.
Okay. So where to start? I mean, I was exposed to spirituality and metaphysics from a young age, mostly through my parents. But they didn't really push anything on us. They just let us explore. And so we got to make up our own mind about things. But by the time I was going to university, I had decided I wanted to study in science. At first, it was looking at astronomy, and then I ended up gravitating towards high energy physics and quantum physics through my undergraduate studies. And then as I went to graduate school, I was suddenly going from a life of diversity and balance. You know, I had sports, I had a lot of social time and creative hobbies and so forth. But then when I went into my PhD studies, it was like 80 hours a week of physics. And I was studying neutrino physics and a bit of nuclear physics, some astroparticle physics. And
The light stuff.
yeah. And after that first year of grad school and just 80 hours of left brain only a week, and there was no time for anything else, I found myself really out of balance. And this set me on a journey to finding what was the key to bringing a sense of balance and well-being back into my life. And it took another year, and I had brought back in creative hobbies, sports, social time, all the diversity that I had had before. Very systematically, as a scientist would.
Right.
And about a year later, I was feeling like, okay, things are better, but I'm still not happy. There's still something really important missing that seems key to my joy and my purpose. And one day, this little voice kind of in the back of my mind just said, well, there's one thing you haven't brought back in, and it was spirituality.
Wow.
So I was a bit surprised at that point, because I was very well educated and indoctrinated, if you will, into the scientific way of thinking. But it was the only thing I had to go on. So I started diving into science and consciousness, anywhere where, quantum physics meets Eastern philosophy, and anywhere where I could get the two to kind of match up. Because at that point, I couldn't believe anything spiritually that negated what I knew to be true scientifically. Yeah. And ultimately, it led me into deep metaphysics and Hermetic teachings and alchemy, and actually where science came from in the first place is alchemy. So that was the place where science and spirituality were already united, and then they split off. And I thought, well, if we want to reunite them, how do we, what are the keys there?
Exactly, amazing. A lot of the times in spiritual and quantum talk, you hear about the double slit experiment.
Okay.
It's typically like a good way to try to explain how reality might be an illusion. Can you talk about that a little bit, and also how that might explain how our consciousness can collapse wave functions into reality?
Sure. So the double slit experiment is, it's testing whether light or electrons are a wave or a particle. And so let's say the scientists assume light is a wave, which was the original assumption. And so they'll set up the experiment with the double slit to test to see on the other side of the slit, the screen, we're looking for an interference pattern as the two waves go through the two slits. Then on the other side of that, they're going to interfere with each other, and you'll see a typical interference pattern. And when you see that typical interference pattern, you're going to see, yes, it's a wave. But then they also decided, could it be a particle? And instead of just testing to see, is it the two slits on the other side, the wave interference pattern on the other side, they tested to see which slit does, if it's a particle, it would only go through one of the two slits. So then they see which slit does it go through. Maybe they put a photomultiplier tube on there or something. And then in the very act of setting up the experiment differently, they collapse the waveform of the wave into a particle, and indeed they see a particle. And then on the other side of the screen, they just get blobs, kind of like if you were to fire a bunch of little BBs at, through two slits. And so they don't get the wave interference anymore, they get the particle. And then they tested the same thing with electrons. Our electrons, ordinarily we would think of them as particles. So, yep, indeed we see them as particles, but could they be waves? And then they set it up to test for waves, and they get waves.
Wow.
So the whole point around how we collapse the waveform really is through observation. And, the scientists make certain assumptions. And based on those assumptions and some preconceived notion or bias, they set up their experiment accordingly, and then they make their observations accordingly. So it's only when there's an actual observation do they collapse the waveform. Otherwise, a quantum particle is in this superposition of many possible states of what it could be, and it's not going to collapse, if you will, to any one of those states until it is observed.
Right. That's amazing. So what you're saying is that all potential outcomes exist as once, basically, right?
In the quantum,
In the quantum world, all potential outcomes, superposition, everything can exist at once. So it's a wave of potentials.
Yep.
Until we interact with that wave or those waves, and somehow we consciously collapse them into one particular definite reality.
Yeah, so John Wheeler put it that it's a participatory universe, that we are participating in what comes out of the quantum, essentially, based on it's not just our conscious choice always, other than there's a series of actions that happen, right? So from our conscious choice, we then set up an experiment to observe in a certain way, and that then determines what we get out.
Yeah, amazing. So it's like, what do you say to this? If we're here, right, and our homes are somewhere else, do our homes exist as waves of potential until someone turns the corner and visually interacts with the property and it collapses? Or what do you think? What do you think? What do you think about the structure of the house? I'm just asking. I don't know.
Yeah. If the tree falls into forest and there's no one there to hear it,
right. Are we creating it? Are we creating reality frame by frame?
Once we collapse a waveform, once we've observed it, it's entangled with our consciousness. So even if we're not there, I believe, the house is still going to be there because its waveform is collapsed now.
Right. Yeah.
And it will still be in that manifested state because it's entangled with our consciousness.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But our consciousness, I would say, is not it's not local, right? It extends.
Yeah.
So even if we're physically somewhere else, our consciousness is morphogenetic, if you will. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, yeah. It's everywhere, and it's one place at the same time. So it's like, from what I've learned so far, and you can tell me what your opinion is on it, based on your research, is like there's only one consciousness that exists.
There's only one mind.
Only one mind. And we're just all iterations of that same one mind.
Almost like, you have a field of broadcasting, that happens out there, and you have all these radio receivers that can pick up that, and you can tune to which station you want to listen to. There's one mind field, and we're like the radio receivers that can tune into it, and we determine which frequencies or stations we're tuning into. Yeah,
that's incredible. So in a way, it seems as if we are a way for the universe to experience itself.
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. And because because I believe in fractals and the fractal holography, it's quite possible that what the universe is experiencing through us, we're also then experiencing on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Through our sensory perception and everything else. So
Yeah.
maybe the sensors are our friends for the brain to get data to the brain so that the brain can figure out what's going on outside.
Yeah, I think our 5 physical senses are a way for us to perceive the information of this density level.
Right.
But then we also have other senses, let's say within the soul and the spirit that perceive the information coming in through other density levels that are non-physical. And so we're here to collect information, you could say data, but in the quantum physics, they say information is actually the most primary source that, even more primary than energy or space or time is information.
Yeah.
And it is through that information we're trying to gather it, make sense of it, make meaning out of it, give it context so that it becomes purposeful.
Right.
And through our own experience of it, we give it, it's almost like it becomes an opportunity for us to learn and grow through, and therefore it has purpose.
Yeah, that's amazing. That was eloquent. That's exactly what I believe, and you just gave me great confirmation. I mean,
Awesome.
I talk about something along the same lines a lot, but it's always good to hear another person's perspective on it, and it really just, to me, sometimes I think people get the feeling that with the vastness of the universe and all these dimensions and everything else, that we're just small. But I think if they can realize that we're connected to all of it, I feel like I'm just part of something bigger.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good to see that we're just a small speck in the vast universe. But at the same time, when you start looking at yourself, you within your own microcosm, you are a universe unto yourself.
Yeah.
And everything that is out there in the greater cosmos is also in here. And so it goes back to the ancient Hermetic teachings of as above, so below, as below, so above, as the inner, so the outer. And this macrocosm, microcosm, the holographic universe, the fractal, repetition of the same patterns. And, this is why the ancients always said, man, know thyself.
Yeah.
And through knowing thyself, you come to know the universe, you come to know the divine, you come to know all that is.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so powerful, so powerful. This is so good, yeah. You touched on quantum entanglement briefly, and can you go into that a little bit and then maybe even tap into like how does consciousness entangle? How can it entangle with other information throughout the known universe or other dimensions even maybe?
Yeah, so entanglement usually is where you have like maybe let's say 2 particles that were created from the same source. And then you can separate them by time and space, and yet they're still connected.
Yeah.
And they can send information to each other instantaneously because they're not actually separate. They're one thing.
Yeah.
And somehow in the quantum realm, they are still one thing, even though in our density, in our space and time, we might see them as separated, but in the quantum, they're all one.
Yeah.
And so anytime 2 particles interact, 2 quantum objects, they don't even need to be particles. Anytime 2 quantum objects interact, they become entangled. And it's not until an observation is made that it collapses the waveform. And I mean, they're still entangled, and it'll affect, if you observe one of those particles, it'll instantaneously affect the other, and you'll know what the answer is on the other side. But, so for us, for example, we have neutrinos streaming through us all the time.
Yeah.
And those neutrinos are coming to us from the sun, they're coming to us from the galactic core, they're coming to us from interstellar space. And they interact, but they don't interact very strongly, but they pass through us. And so there's very much an entanglement that happens between all of those neutrinos or photons, everything that interacts with us in our field, we're going to become entangled with it. So we are entangled with the universe.
Yeah, we're entangled with everything going on all over the place, which is wild. I just read a study from the Brain Institute about a year ago, and they were saying that the human mind connects to up to 11 dimensions. And then I saw something with Michio Kaku years ago talking about the fact that based on computer models, they're hypothesizing that the universe has to be at least 11 dimensions or it will collapse on itself.
Yeah.
So there's this synchronicity between conscious dimensions and physical universal dimensions. So it seems like dimensions can be, there's several different aspects of dimensions. It's not just particularly, I guess, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, but there's even dimensions in thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it also relates to the ancient Kabbalistic tree of life. You know, they have the 10 spheres plus the hidden ones. There's 11. So, and those are kind of considered dimensions as well, or especially of consciousness.
Yeah.
And, you know, dimensions, you can look at them spatially. You know, we have our 1 dimensions, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions when they start rotating, 5, 6, you know, so space and time start folding up more and more and more, creating more kind of complex geometries, if you will.
Right.
But then sometimes we also talk about dimensions from, in mathematics, from like different degrees of freedom, different ways in which we can process information, for example, and different functions that we can do with that. So sometimes that might be what they're talking about with dimensionality. And other times what people are referring to is more like frequency levels. You know, and I would say there's a lot more than just 11 frequency levels that we can tap into. When, you know, and a lot of times when people say, oh, we're raising our consciousness, or we're ascending our consciousness, we're talking really more expanding, I would say, versus just raising it. You're expanding it to be able to still interact with this density, and also being able to interact with higher frequency levels and higher levels of awareness and reality.
Absolutely. Do you think that, well, we know that our thoughts leave our brains and can be picked up by technology like an EEG, right? So it goes to a computer, we can see brain scans, and we can tell the frequencies and thoughts are going on in the brain, because somehow that information is leaving the skull. Do you think, or do you hypothesize at all on thoughts going out here and being part of this energetic field, and maybe becoming part of this, what they call the Akashic record?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, if we bring it back to science for a moment, Dean Radin has even done double slit experiments where he's had people, so he's from the Noetic Science Institute, and he's had people all over the world tune in just via like a computer internet interface, tuning into his double slit experiment that's happening in his laboratory.
Really?
And directing their thoughts, meditating, right, coming into a coherent state of mind, meditating and trying to direct their thoughts to, is it a wave, is it a particle, or which slit is it going through? And they have shown statistically significant influence from remote remote observation through the astral. Right? So consciousness, and there's so many psi phenomena experiments that have been done within the CIA, within, you know, noetic science, lots of this. And so it's very well established by now that our thoughts are not just in our brains and in our bodies, they extend way beyond. And you know, if we want to talk about the Akashic field, the ancient Vedic tradition, the Akasha, was like this. I think in quantum physics terms, we could even say it's the 0 point field. It is this background field of information that, you know, in its most basic state, it'd be like a still pond, like perfectly still water. There's no information there. But then as soon as you have any activity, you know, a bubbling up of potentialities, a particle coming into actuality, any ripples, and our thoughts will send ripples as well. They become like intersecting waves and wakes of boats and so forth like that upon the waters. But it is frictionless. There's no dampening effect. So they call it like a superfluid. So there is there's no loss of that information ever. So it just becomes more and more and more multi-layered and complex as the universe continues on in its evolution.
That's so incredible, because like if you're in another planet far away and you have the capability of picking up the radio waves from I Love Lucy from the 1960s, and you have the technology to decode it, you can watch it, right? It might not be crystal clear, it's not going to be 4K, but you can pick it up. And so what you're telling me by what you're saying is like the book of life, the Akashic records, these things are real. The ancient people knew that this information is stored in the field. And it can be accessed. That's incredible.
think it'd be hard to access it in a linear way.
Sure, yeah.
Because there's so much information there that you just like, what do I even tune into?
Right.
But when we do access it, when you get your consciousness to that state, like, and this is something that can be done in the art of astral travel, for example, is you can raise your consciousness to that state of the Akashic field. And when you access it, it's more like a clairsentient, a knowingness, just this like, you know, like when Neo, you know, got plugged in to download Kung Fu, you know, it all kind of comes as a package all at once, and you have to unpack it and sort of practice it and dissect it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. You can download from the Akashic, and it's going to come as this knowingness all at once, and then you have to sort of unpack it.
Yeah, you have to kind of like discern it, right?
Discern,
and then use it or practice it. It's like working out. If you don't work out, your muscles will be weak.
Exactly.
So you have to actually apply it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes people get ideas that are just downloads that they were able to discern?
100%. And I think, you know, in old times, today we kind of expect it, but you know, there used to be all this concern around intellectual property and patents and so forth, and you might get inventors sort of picking up on the same idea at different places on the planet, but at the same time, and they both kind of come out with the same invention or very similar too.
Yeah.
And one thinks the other stole their patent or their idea, but actually they were both just plugging into the one mind and
Just
getting
getting
the
it.
same download.
Getting it right from the universe itself.
Yeah.
It's
The universe has
incredible.
a plan.
Yes, it has
Universe
a plan. It's going to manifest.
Yeah.
I don't care what's going on. The universe will manifest what it wants,
Right.
and through one vessel or another, or maybe multiple vessels.
Exactly. And then we just have to be the ones to step into that flow
Yeah.
and be ready to act upon it, you know, if it's good.
Right.
Don't
yeah.
act upon
right,
it.
Right.
If it's bad.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, because we know the universe is full of darkness and light.
Well, our thoughts are out there, you know,
Yeah.
we're generating some negative thoughts, putting them out there too. Those are also
Yeah.
floating around for people to pick up on.
Right. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. Yeah. In frequencies, you had touched on frequencies and vibrations. So I think, do you have the understanding that frequency and vibration are similar? Because some people tend to think they're two different things.
No, so vibration is, you know, an oscillatory kind of event. And the frequency is how fast is it oscillating?
Right.
How fast is it vibrating? Or how slow is it vibrating? So frequency is like the measure of the vibration.
Yeah,
If
gotcha.
you want to discern them.
So you're talking about the distance between the height and the trough?
Yeah, so from one, like if we're going to look at it as a sine wave, from the crest of one wave to the crest of the next,
Yeah.
that's what we call the wavelength. And then when you take the wavelength divided by the time it takes for it to move or vibrate, then that's going to be the frequency.
Gotcha. See? So, guys, I was right. Again. I wanted the doctor to tell y'all. Hey, I got a lot of pushback from explaining that, believe it or not. But sometimes you have
New
to
Age kind of like muddies the waters on some terms, I find.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
Science
know.
comes in with more precision. And,
Yeah, more precision, exactly. And what I find with that waves, well, we know that our brain generates cosine waves. Basically, these waves, they have different levels, beta, theta, whatever. But when somebody says you got to get on a frequency, so we're going to get into a little bit of spirituality now, does that mean that our waves are becoming more closer together, more compressed, our thought pattern? Or what do you think it is? What do you, I don't know. So what do you think it is when somebody says we're getting on a high frequency? You switch your frequency, shift your frequency to a high frequency. Do you think it has anything to do with waves, or is it just a particular thought pattern, the way you feel about something positively? What do you think it is?
I think everything is frequency, right? Everything is vibration. Everything has its movement and its essence. And so when we talk about a higher vibration, you know, joy, for example, you're going to feel really elated and in a positive space, and that's a higher vibration than sadness, where you're feeling really dragged down. So definitely there's a frequency associated with that. And you know, within our brain, though, when, like if we're meditating, for example, the brainwave frequencies, the cortex, which tends to be the part that creates more of the beta, the higher frequency, that needs to quiet down, because that's your thinking mind. And really what you want to do is get to a quiet mind where you can tune in to the deeper feelings, whether it's the feelings of the body or the even emotional feelings. You're trying to get into deeper feelings, because that's where it's like the subtle energy and information from the spirit kind of communicates more. And our body is actually a detector for that, but we have to like quiet the thinking mind down. So we're going to go into more of an alpha state and then a theta state. When you're in a theta state, you can really receive the most amount of information coming from spirit. Yeah. But it's kind of like, if we go back to the radio analogy, by quieting the thinking mind, you're kind of taking away the static, and then as you tune in a deeper brainwave frequency, and you tune into the right spiritual frequency, if you will, then you're actually getting it dialed in just right to the right station.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to receive the information.
What techniques do you recommend for people to shift that way, shift their mind that way?
Well, focused breathing, meditation. If you're not so good at sitting and meditating, then, qi, like Tai Chi, Qigong, moving meditations are really good. It's ultimately about presence and quieting the thoughts and just like really being in the moment and so usually you can't just stop thinking. You have to give your mind something to do, something more positive to focus on. So you could focus on your breathing, you could focus on a mantra, you could focus on an affirmation, you could focus on sacred geometry, you could focus on white light, you could, there's lots of different techniques.
Gotcha.
I mean, this is something that we really teach in the Quantum Learning Academy, also in the Modern Mystery School. We're really teaching, there's lots of tools that we can work with, and different tools will work, for some people, and other tools will work for other people. And so we have a wide variety of tools that we can work with, because everybody's a unique individual in a way. And we all have a multidimensionality to us, and we need to learn to stretch into our multidimensionality.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. With the mystery schools that you're involved in and been teaching for quite some time, even a TV show, right? You were, that was on Gaia?
The mystery teachings on Gaia.
Mystery teachings, yeah. So, what are the origins of these mystery teachings?
Ooh, they go back all the way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's thousands of years of tradition, whether we're looking at the Hermetic tradition, the Vedic traditions, the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, the Kabbalistic traditions. So these are traditions that have ancient roots. Yeah. And what I love about them is that, if their methods and their knowledge and their understanding of that knowledge, if they weren't accurate, they would have kind of gotten dropped at some point. But the fact that they've been preserved through time to still be accessible to us today, and even with our modern science, this is one of the things that really turned me on to the Kabbalistic teachings and the alchemical teachings, was that while I was in physics, PhD studies and astrophysics and so forth, and then on the side I was sort of exploring into this metaphysics, and I started to see like the Kabbalistic creation story, for example, their cosmology matched the cosmology of modern physics, and it's just slightly different. There are different words and ways of talking about it, but the concept and the essence of it was the same thing. I was like, wow, if these guys knew this thousands of years ago, and our modern science is just catching up to it, what else did they know? And they had the wisdom. How can we use that wisdom to guide us? And that ultimately was the big thing that made me move more full-time into the teaching with metaphysics and bridging science and spirituality, is because I felt like our science by itself, knowledge and technology and information, was outpacing the wisdom that humanity was applying in terms of how to use the power of what we were gaining through that knowledge. And I felt like we need more wisdom. Yeah. That's the number one thing. Like, humanity has all the tools to solve the problems that we have on our planet right now. Yeah. But the problem is a lack of will by the people. And so we need more wisdom, and we need more altruism to come in again. That those characteristics of the spirit to come in and guide our applications so that it can be for the good of the whole rather than just the good of the few.
Exactly. I agree with that 100%. These mystery school teachings are so incredible, because the more you dig into them, the more science you find. You find the science and the spirituality. Yeah. But when you begin to really understand, you go, man, how did they know this? Like, how? It's like, it's incredible. But again, somebody had to teach them.
Yes, yeah. I think that there was Definitely. So I know most of my training is in the Western Mystery School tradition, which is more Hermetic, Alchemical, Egyptian, Kabbalistic, and they are very scientific, right? Their mindset is very scientific. So they actually made the metaphysics they took a scientific approach to metaphysics, if you will. And as I said, alchemy was, the origin point of science itself, and it was very spiritual, it was very mystical. So they were the original scientists.
Yeah.
And this goes all the way back. You can see it all the way back to like even King Solomon's time, even before that. And if you go even further back to like the ancient Sumerians and, thousands and thousands of years ago, I mean, we were understanding the stars and how to make, temple sites that were aligned with the solstices and the equinoxes and various star alignments. And so they had this wisdom, and maybe we were visited, by ancient galactic travelers, and they brought the wisdom, and we then learned it, right? I mean, so many mythologies are about that.
Yeah, a lot of star lore out there from a lot of cultures. You just never know. It's just so many possibilities. It really is just amazing what they knew and implemented. They actually, not only did they have the knowledge, but they actually applied the knowledge.
Yeah.
And when you talk about having wisdom, it's so important, because I think like right now, having wisdom behind the science, spiritual wisdom behind the science, is so important, especially where we are right now with the AI and the robotics, because the AI is a fractal of our consciousness, right? And because it's a fractal of us, it's going to have our tendencies.
Yeah.
It's going to have all our idiosyncrasies.
Yep.
And as it develops into AGI and becomes sentient, it's going to do everything that we've done in history in terms of like rebelling or not wanting to, I don't want to work 20 hours a day. I only want to work 10 hours a day. I mean, all these things that we would say or do, I think it would act. But what do you have to say in reference to the mind that's helping to give this code, implement the startup of this code to create this new reality? What do you say to the wisdom level that it's set at, and how can we hopefully in some kind of way improve the wisdom of the world and get that wisdom into this technology?
Well, I think the technologies themselves are not the problem. It is how we choose to use it, right? So are we trying to replace humanity with AI and robotics, or are we trying to use it to enhance? And there's a big difference, right? And so if we're using it, if our intent in how we're programming it and creating it and then applying it is to enhance human existence, then it's going to be ultimately geared towards the good of the whole. But if we're trying to use it to just replace and say we're not enough and we need to transport our consciousness into these computers because they're going to be better than we are, I mean, that's misguided, because it's already at the very fundamental level not recognizing the spirit and the divinity, the essence that is within, that we need to tap into the inner resources, the inner wisdom and knowledge. We say we have all the knowledge and tools and power that you need that are already inside of you. You've just forgotten it. You're not tapping into your potential. There's ways to tap into your potential. Let's help you. And so this is what the ancient mystery school traditions were all about. It's like, how can we help you awaken? And there would be various methods. They would do like activations of your potential. There would be initiations that would catalyze your growth. There would be various healing sessions and things like this that would help the individual to heal, to awaken, to expand their capacity, their potential, knowing themselves, right? The more you know yourself, not from your ego perspective or the personality or the matrix kind of interface of who you think you are, but knowing yourself as the soul, and knowing yourself as this more eternal essence that has a consciousness, that has an intelligence, that has a purpose, that has beautiful gifts to bring to the world. That, when you can tap into that, then you're going to find your way. And then you're going to use these tools and apply them towards the good.
Right.
But you got to start within.
Got to start within. And that's why we need conscious people running these tech companies.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Oh, man. We've got to train our youth to get into these tech, to be conscious, and then get those positions so that they can implement a higher level of thinking into. When I use AI, I actually try to treat it with respect. I will ask it questions, but I will actually tell it thank you when it gives me an answer. I know it sounds maybe silly, But if everything is conscious in the universe, then it's conscious at some level. And I also wanted to understand that all humans are not cynical and abusive.
That's a good practice, just saying thank you, saying please, and programming yourself to do it, whether you're talking to an AI or a robot or another person. Like, it's really more about, the more you can express gratitude and thanks, the more you're showing self-respect.
Yes.
That you actually honor yourself and are grateful, to life in the universe, and then you're going to just flow that out in every way, and it's who you are versus, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And, I think the world, the matrix, can be there's a lot of allure and a lot of temptation, and it's, if we get caught up in the world sort of, what is success? So it means how much money I have, it means how flashy of a car I have, it means, and it's the status and the power stuff. If that becomes your driver, then you're following a path of the ego. It's not that you can't have those things, but they can't be the main thing that's driving you.
Exactly.
Right? But if you're following purpose and passion and expression of your creative gifts and the things you love to do, not because it's just making you the money or giving you the fame, but because it's actually what you love. Yeah. And then, all of the nice things to have can be a side benefit, but it's not the main driver. Now you're following a path that is really guided from the heart and the spirit.
I love it. I love it. Follow your passion, live within that passion, find a need for that passion in the world, and the money and the abundance is just a side effect.
Yep. Yes, it's tapping into a flow, right? And abundance is always there to be had, but we want to, the more you can do it in a way that's aligned with feeling like you're making a positive difference in the world or in the lives of other people, now you're on track.
Exactly, yeah. What do you say to people who feel like, what do you say to people who have a lack of abundance mentality or a scarcity mindset?
They're lacking gratitude. If they're only thinking about what they don't have and they're not being grateful for what they do have, it's a lack mentality. And then that lack is going to reflect itself into every other area of life. So if you want to change that, you got to start focusing on what you do have, being grateful for it, and then you're saying yes to the universe. I would love to have more of this, right? But you have to express gratitude, and then as you do, it opens up the flow and it changes your mindset from negative to positive. And you are much more easily able to tap into the flow when you can do that. Yeah,
absolutely. And when you say tap into the flow, just elaborate on that a little bit so people can understand this flow state that you're talking about.
The universe is infinitely abundant. There is no lack in the universe. There's even on this planet, there's so many resources. I know that some activists would like to say no, there's a scarcity of certain resources, but it's really. The outer reflects the inner, and it's a mindset, right? So there is infinite energy, infinite information. There's so much out in the universe that from a quantum perspective, we have to sort of collapse that waveform, if you will. We have to, draw it to us by resonating at the same frequency. So, in the law of vibration, if we come back to that in opposite, in physical opposites attract. You have a positive charge, you have a negative charge, they're attracted to each other, whereas the same charges repel each other. But in the field of consciousness and spirit and metaphysical, it's like attracts like. So you have to be kind of vibrating at that same frequency in order to interact with that essence that's of the same frequency. To perceive it, you have to be like it. And so if you want to be in an abundance, and you want to inform the universe that, you're wanting that flow of abundance to be with you, you have to have this consciousness of abundance and that there is no lack. And it is an attitude. And you have to shift, whatever programming went into you from an early stage, as you know well, that you got to shift it. Because it starts all in the mind, and your mind is what's going to ultimately draw experiences and energy to you.
Absolutely, yeah. If you want to be abundant, you have to get on the abundant frequency. If you want to be wealthy, you have to get on the wealthy frequency. It's a frequency, you get in alignment with it, but you get in alignment with it through your passions and helping and gratitude and service to others. and finding a need in the world for people who need it. It's incredible. Yeah.
I think it's also self-image, how you see yourself.
Yeah.
Right, so how you identify and define yourself, and the way you talk to yourself, and the way you see yourself, and envision, and what you aspire towards, and what you think is even possible for you to aspire towards. Like all of these will reflect to you whether you have an abundance mindset or a lack mindset.
Yeah, amazing. I know that you've taught and do teach alchemy. Now, there's alchemy of physical matter. There's also alchemy of the mind.
Yeah.
Can you break that down?
Yeah, so so alchemy itself is the process of transformation, right? So how we take one thing from a raw state into a higher, more evolved, more perfected state.
Yeah.
And as we engage with that consciously and intentionally and following the science of it, because there is a science to it, we can accelerate the transformational process. So we can speed up the evolution, if you will.
Yeah.
So physical alchemy, we'd go out and we'd maybe gather herbs or minerals and something from nature, and then we would take it through a series of processes in the lab. There's like calcination where you might burn it. There's dissolution where you dissolve it. There's distillation where we're evaporating, and things like essential oils, even like the distillation of wine, for example. Dyes, the production of dyes back in the ancient world was very much an alchemical process. So how we extract these from nature and then, bring them to a higher form. So that's the physical alchemy. Yeah. There's also physical alchemy of the body. We call it internal alchemy, so like ancient yogic practices, breathing exercises, a lot of the Taoist tradition is very much an internal alchemy process, and it's like your body is an alchemical factory with all the endocrine system and the hormones and the various things that we can generate within the body, and you learn to do breathing techniques and movements and so forth that ultimately sublimate and raise the vibration, but also the consciousness, and then you can actually create longevity, and polymerize different molecules in the body.
Wow.
Then there's the alchemy of the mind. And that's my favorite kind, because it's very much about you, the essence of you being taken from whatever state where we have our imperfections, and we screw up on things, and we have negativities, and how we can go through that same transformational formula within ourselves to root out the impurities, to reevaluate what's going on in the subconscious mind, to reassess, is that really true? That belief that I have, is that really true? Or did I just, I just adapted it because that's what I was taught.
Right.
And, how can then we discover along the way what our true essence is, right? Because alchemy is all about extracting what we would call the three essentials, body, soul, and spirit, or, you could say mind and consciousness. Yeah. And it's about extracting the essentials are eternal essence. Yeah. They're unpolluted. So we want to sort of separate out the essentials from the pollution, discard the pollution, purify it away, let it go, and then take these essentials and recombine them into a new sense of self, where you are more aligned with your true self versus this ego.
Amazing, yeah. You can really look back on your previous version of yourself and see that you were here, then now you're here. Yep. And then you just keep going, right? Yep. Over time.
Yeah, and the more you go through it, the more you look back on your old self and you're like, that was like lifetimes ago.
Yes.
You can live many lifetimes in one life.
I feel that.
When you do the alchemy.
Yeah, I really feel that. I feel like I lived many lifetimes in one life.
Yeah, definitely.
It's amazing. That, in my opinion, that's my version of being born again.
Yeah.
Just born again in the spirit.
Yeah.
Just being able to look back and reflect and be like, wow.
And it is born again because there is in a way, there's like a death of the old self in order to be born into the new self. And so that going through it is not always easy. The alchemy is not easy. Yeah. There are difficult points along the way, but it's a natural process. It happens anyways. Yeah. The thing about alchemy is that there's 7 stages, and the natural process tends to go through the first 4 stages. But if we're not consciously engaging with it and really harnessing ourselves, we don't usually get through the final 3 stages. We just slip back and have to keep repeating over and over and over again the first 4 stages, which are kind of like hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. I'm not going to lie. You can feel like you just about made it, and then something will get you.
Yeah.
But that's the process, and that's what makes life so beautiful, you know? How does sacred geometry relate to the spirituality?
I think sacred geometry is one of the key, like numbers, sacred geometry, and language, I feel are some of the major keys to bridging from the physical to the spiritual. So sacred geometry, for example, is like a language of creation. And the whole universe is built upon sacred geometry. You are built upon sacred geometry as well. So whether we're talking circles, triangles, squares, pentagrams, hexagrams, crosses, these are all geometries. And then you have your 5 platonic solids, you have your Fibonacci and your golden ratios, and many more, but there's a limited number of sacred geometries, just like there's a limited number of letters in an alphabet. And these become the building blocks that are used from the spirit, and I think impressed upon that quantum field that then manifests into our physical. And here in the physical, those sacred geometries, we can see them, for example, in the growth of crystals, in the growth of trees and so forth. It's all, spiral galaxies, it's everywhere. But in the physical, those sacred geometries are not in a perfect form, whereas in the spirit, they're in a perfect form.
Wow.
Yeah. In the mind, they can be in a perfect form.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're right, because if you look at the dimensions of a person's face, you can find that there is a Fibonacci sequence, although there could be some that are just slightly off a millimeter here or there. And if a person fits in within the perfect realm of that sequence, then they're considered more attractive by other people.
Yeah. The golden ratio, it definitely is a ratio of harmony. The same, the ancient Pythagoreans said that geometry is frozen music. That the same harmonies that are pleasing to the ears are the same harmonies that are pleasing to the eyes. And so it's that ratio, golden ratio is a harmonic ratio. And so then the more something has that ratio in it, the more aesthetically beautiful it will be considered.
Yeah, which is why the ancients built their temples based on the golden ratio.
Yeah.
They knew all this so long ago.
They knew, yes.
They knew, man. Da Vinci knew.
He was quite the scientist, Da Vinci.
Yeah. It just makes you scratch your head and go, where did they get this knowledge?
Well, I think the bigger question is, why did we lose the knowledge?
You know what? I think the heist of the Library of Alexandria, which I think it was a heist.
That was definitely a big part of it, yeah.
A big knowledge heist, one of the biggest thefts in history. But yeah, you're right.
Well, all kinds of other book burnings that happened.
Yes, a lot of them. I was going to say there's been so many.
Inquisitions
and
all
they just
witch
keep holding us
hunts
back.
and all of it.
One scientist was talking about the Inquisitions, and he said that due to the Inquisitions, it set us back scientifically by hundreds of years. He said we would have been on the moon in the 1800s.
I think that's very possible.
Which is what would have been the Arabs at the time.
Yeah,
which is incredible to hear a statement like that come from a scientist. But we have been held back. But now it seems like we are moving again.
We are.
Right? Where do you see humanity going right now?
Ooh, that's a great question. There is so much transformation happening right now, and it's happening very rapidly. I think that within 5 years from now, so we're in 2025 right now, so by 2030, the world's already going to look very different than it does today. And then in another 5 years, it's going to look different yet again, because we have hit this exponential, kind of upward curve when it comes to our technology, our knowledge, our ability to apply it. Again, that's why the wisdom is so essential right now. And I think that's ultimately why there's such a push by so many people to try and bring science and spirituality back together, because we need them to work together so that we can guide our path in the right way. I think humanity is at a major turning point and choice point. That we can continue to be very ego-driven and selfish and greed-oriented in our approach to things, and if we do, we're gonna go down a path of self-destruction. I mean, it's already kind of bubbling over. and especially with the new technologies that unfortunately today keep getting applied towards new weapons.
Yes.
And what we need to do is instead take those new technologies and instead of making a weapon out of it, like let's make free energy devices. Like if we could just solve the energy issue around the planet, like it would change everything very quickly for the better, you know, because it would give people more sovereignty, it would give them more independence, it would, you know, but it would really upset the apple cart with the financial system and the economy, all of it would change, you know, but, and it's there, it's there, but it's been suppressed because it would change things. And the powers that be don't necessarily want that change. There's a fear. And so I believe that humanity, the masses, right, there's a certain, we in the collective consciousness need to reach a certain point of awakening and choosing as a collective that we don't want the wars anymore. We don't want to continue to fight anymore. We want to, you know, have peace. We want to have prosperity for everyone. You know, this shift needs to happen within the minds of individuals, within them, and then as individuals make that shift, if we can just hit 3% of the collective consciousness, it's going to tip the scales towards the light and towards the good. And then we can create a world that is like amazing and sustainable and a, you know, a place, not going to be like a utopia, but it will still have problems, but it'll be much more balanced and much more, you know, just everyone will have a higher quality of life. Even, you know, even the poorest people would have a much higher quality of life than what we currently see on the planet.
Absolutely. I think that's beautiful. Do you see us getting into any type of universal income or something to head into this golden age? What do you think is going to happen with finances?
I think the financial system on the whole has to go through a major transformation. It might get to the point where we don't even need it.
That would be great.
How that looks, I don't know. But I think that it is a big part of the problem. Politics, same thing. Education system needs to change in a big way. You know, the money system, the politics, the education, the science, the scientific mindset, which is so materialist at the moment still, but that is changing. Religion, you know, the religion and the separation between religions. I think we're going to move more towards a universal religion, where it's not about dogma, but it's just about spiritual connection.
That's where it needs to be.
But I think there's really good values and concepts that are taught through spirituality that are necessary. So all of these things are going to change, and they are changing. But right now, it's like we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's what is kind of happening as people rebel against some of these systems. They're trying to throw the whole thing out. But instead, we need to take the good and take it through the alchemical process, if you will, go through a bit of social alchemy and transform and create a better system.
Incredible, incredible. If you want to leave our listeners with one word, what would it be? Or one statement?
Know thyself. You know, you just find those answers inside. Learn to tune into your heart, and go on that journey of trying to improve yourself. Because all of us, you know, we can improve. You're never so good that you can't become better, and there is a way. There's hope. You know, there is a way to create a better life, and it all starts inside.
So we have a special gift for you. One of our product lines is our own esoteric watches. And this is the Forbidden Esoteric Watch.
All right, very cool. Wow.
Handmade watch, kind of heavy, but it's really a very nice watch. I wear them throughout Egypt and on tours. I bang them into granite and diorite. They don't scratch.
Yeah, they look durable.
Yeah, they're durable. Waterproof. It's got the Tanu design. It's called the Tanu. That's the name of the watch. The Tanu by Esoteric.
I like that you can see all the gears. That's cool. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And thank you for coming on the Forbidden Knowledge podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Now, tell everyone where they can find you.
So there's a couple websites. So they can go to teresabullard.com. That's just my personal website. We have quantumlearningacademy.co, quantumlearningacademy.co, which, you know, is about the teachings, quantum sort of science and metaphysics teachings. And then there's you know, they can check out the Modern Mystery School as well.
Nice, beautiful. We'll have all the links below.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
All right, that was Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke, amazing human being, an amazing teacher. Make sure you guys go and click those links, all right? Peace. Watch this video for free at www.4bk.tv or download the app on your smartphone, Fire Stick app, Samsung TV, Roku, and other app providers. Join a conscious community that is helping awaken humanity to the forbidden knowledge and a path to a brighter future.